Okay, welcome everyone. Andrea is going to present on getting started with requests. If you could please give him a warm welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me clearly, even from the back rows? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So, hello everyone. This is my first Pycon UK. I've been previously to Pycon Italy a couple of times, or three, I don't remember. My name is Andrea Grandi. I live in London, work in London as a software engineer for M&S Digital, Max Spencer. Apart from Python and Django, I also enjoy doing some mobile development and playing with Arduino, IoT stuff, and of course microbit with MicroPython. So before going into the details of this library that I'm going to present, let's see what is an HTTP request. Just as a recap, I assume 99% of you already knows what is an HTTP request. So when, for example, you're using your browser to request or send, to request or to send some data, you're actually performing an HTTP request using the browser as a client. In this picture, you can see we are sending our login information through a post. Let's see a live example. If the connection works. Let's see a live example here. So what happens when you do a request? Let's see. I'm not sure if you can, yeah. So, as you can see from the Chrome debug tools, we have just done a GET request that was successful. Yeah, it was successful, and you see from the return code. And we got some information back. So, the point of this talk, of course, is to show you how to do this kind of request and even more complex requests using the HTTP request library, so from Python. Let's go back to the presentation. So what is request? Request is an HTTP library for Python. All the Python versions are supported, so even the 2.6 that you should not be using at the moment, but even 2.6 is supported. And of course, even the recent 3.3 and 3.5 versions. It's not an amateur library. I mean, it's not used just by amateur project. It's used from very large companies like Amazon, Google, Twilio, and all the companies you can see here. It's actively maintained, so it's not one of this library that you may, oh, cool, that library. Let me check GitHub repository. Last commit 1 year ago. No, maybe it's not supported. Don't worry, this is actively maintained. And the bonus, the most important thing is that it's very, very easy to use. Let's see why. But first, a quick look at the philosophy behind this library. That is, beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit, simple is better than complex, and complexity is better than complicated. And most important, readability counts. So what does this everything mean? That means that the readability of your source code is very important because if your source code is simple, it's even more easy to maintain and to be read from your colleague, from your friends, and whatever. So it's very important that your source code is, the code of your project is very well concise. You may wonder, why not urlib2? Because urlib2 is included in Python as a default library. So why not using urlib2? Well, let's have a look at an example about exactly the same request, the same thing we want to do. First with urlib and then with request. So in this case, I hope you can, yes, a bit small, but you can read. In this case, what I want to do is to use the GitHub API, authenticating with username and password, and just request a URL. So, and see if I can actually authenticate. So I'm importing the library, I'm defining the URL, I'm creating a new request, I'm using the password manager to because I will need it for adding username and password. Then I will add the password manager to the HTTP basic authentication handler. Then I need to create an opener, and I need to install the opener into the library. Then I need to open the URL. And finally, I can get the status code that was just as an example. So let's see how to do this in request. So as you can notice, it's much, much more simple. Authentication is supported natively, so you don't have to use any external library. You just get your resource, you pass username and password, and that's it. It's ready to be consumed. Let's see now some more complex requests, but always maintaining simplicity, because I remember this talk is for beginners. Probably more advanced Python developers already knows this library, but even so, don't worry. So this is a simple GET request. You just have to pass the URL to the method, and that's it. Of course, now you have in mind that you may have some parameters to pass to the GET, and here is how you do it. So you don't have to manually encode, for example, question mark, name of the parameters, equal, and then the value is encoded. That doesn't mean that the values don't need to be encoded. That means that these values will be encoded automatically by the library for you. So that's all you have to do. You define a payload that is basically a dictionary with key values, and you pass this payload to the params parameter. That's it. Your request is ready. The same way you can do a post. To do a post, you're just basically defining the same key values payload, and you call the post method, passing all this payload to the data parameter. That's it. An important thing that you also have is that requests can encode JSON automatically for you. So when you're consuming, for example, REST API, you don't have to, and you need to send JSON or JSON request. You don't have to do it manually. The payload will be encoded automatically for you if you use the JSON parameter. Custom headers can be important in case, for example, in this case, I'm pretending to fake the user agent. So it's my app 0.0.1, and you just set this property. You may set other similar properties, and you pass this parameter to the request, and that's it. You don't have to do anything else. All these methods, of course, are supported. Now you have seen some example of get and post, but all these methods are supported. And don't worry if you don't know some of them. You may have used put, patch, and delete, consuming REST API. If you haven't used head or options, yeah, you don't have to worry. They're all anyway supported. Now let's have a look at responses, because of course you have done your request. You will get something back, and you want to know what you're getting back, how to deal with it. So as we have seen before, the most simple thing you may want to check after a request is the status code, because the status code tells you if your request was successful or not. So in this case, our request, as we have seen before, was successful. Yay! And you may want to compare the status code with predefined variables. So in this case, I want to check if the request is okay or not. And I'm doing this simple check that returned true, because my status code was successful. Let's see what happens in case of a bad request. A bad request may happen, for example, when you try to request something that you're not authorized to request, or maybe a resource that doesn't exist, or you know, there could be an internal server error, the famous 500. So anything could happen, and in this case, it's a bad response. And you can check the response in two ways. So you can just inspect the status code and do, for example, okay, is 404, then do this. If it's 500, do this. Or have something, so a default behavior, if something wrong happened. In this case, if you call the raise for status method after a request, what happens? if the response was unsuccessful, you will raise an exception. If the response was successful, you will not raise an exception. This can be very useful because you try catch it, you may want to log the error and inspect it later. We have seen before the JSON encoder. You also have the JSON decoder. So assume you have just called a REST API. You want to inspect what you have been returned back, and you just call the .json method, and that's it. You get back a Python dictionary that you can use in your application. You can also, of course, inspect the headers that are in the response, and this may be useful and can give you some, I don't know, debugging information, or you may want to log this data somehow, so that can be useful to know. Just curiosity, you can access these properties in any casing. So, for example, content type with C and T capitalized, or content type with all lowercase. Cookies are important, are those annoying things that when you visit a web page, our website uses cookies. You won't accept them? Yes. How to deal with them with requests? Well, you just request a URL, you will get them back automatically, and you inspect the cookies dictionary, and you will find them all the values. Sessions are very important because assume you are requesting something that requires authentication. So you first authenticate, you get the cookies back, so a session is created. But if you try to do a request with a new request object, you will be asked again to be authenticated. So instead, if you wrap all your requests using a session, you authenticate the first time, then the cookie is automatically set, and you don't have to authenticate every time. So we just do the following request without authenticating again. So that's important to have, especially if you're implementing a client. Timeouts are very important. Assuming you're writing some code that may take long time to execute. You want to set a timeout. So, for example, if the request takes more than 5 seconds, just fail, log me an error. Especially if you're loading like large images and the connection is slow, you want to still, for example, load the page, but you don't want to, or return the resource, but you don't want to waste time or let the user wait too long. And in this case, you raise an exception. So we assume that you will intercept this exception. You will log the error, and you can keep processing the other stuff. This is a more advanced topic, so I won't get too much into details, but just for your information, normally when you call one of these methods, these are serial requests. You can do multiple requests at the same time. You can do using these libraries. The first one is developed by the same person who developed the request library. The other two are very similar. They use Python futures that have been backported, so they also work with Python 2.7. And yeah, I leave you this link so you can have a better look in case you want to process multiple requests. I've written an example anyway about how to use just a very simple multiple request. So using gRequest, you basically define a list with the URLs you want to request. You create the request with get in this case, and when you map them, all the requests will be executed in parallel. But keep in mind that the execution finishes when even the last one, so the slowest one, is finished. So you are saving time because you are executing them in parallel, but you still have to wait for the slowest one. A small recap with error and exceptions. Error and exceptions, so we have seen before the timeout. That's just one of the exceptions you may want to, you can have back, or HTTP error that is raised by the raise for status. So when you're going to use raise for status and there is an exception, you will get back with HTTP error. Or there may be a more generic connection error, so in case of network problems, refused connection, whatever. Or finally, too many redirects that may happen for a misconfiguration or a similar error. So in this case, you know how to handle that. Testing. I wanted to include a couple of examples about how to test this code, because I think testing is not just a side job, is part of your job. So if you're writing any client using request or using any other library, you're responsible for testing. So you can see a couple of examples. You have no excuses like, oh, I'd like to test this library, but I really don't know how to do that. No excuses. Now you will see how to do that in a couple of methods. First, let's define a method. This is a very simple method that basically replicates what we have done at the beginning. So we are requesting the http bin.org get. Just out of curiosity, this website that is very useful to test your libraries is written by the same person, has been written by the same person who wrote request library. Close note. So this method basically requests the get page and return the JSON. That's it. How to test it? Well, first you can use mock. When you use mock, you normally have to patch a method. Patching a method means that you want to modify, you want to change the behavior of a specific method you're going to call. For example, in our code, we are calling request.get. Well, patching this method means that I hijack the call to this method, and I intercept it, and I substitute the response with something else. In this case, I'm substituting with 200 response, and this will be the example dictionary that I will return. So you're setting up all things. So this is what I'm expect to return. You set up the object, and finally you call your original method. This assertion will pass because basically you have changed the behavior of the original page, so you can assert this. This test logically is not testing anything, but it's just to show you how to change the behavior of the library and how to test it, so how to mock it. There is another library dedicated to request testing, and it's called responses. Responses, in my opinion, is more simple to be used because the code looks more clean, but pay attention because if you don't specify exactly the kind of request and the URL, basically if they don't match with the request that you're doing, you won't get back, you won't intercept correctly the request. So that means that you will call the real endpoint, the real API, and of course we may have different data that won't match with the data you have in your test. Are these tests really running? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Okay, yes, these tests are running. If you want to have a look at the original source code, it's here, but don't worry, I have a link in the slide, so you will be able to get this example, but it's very, very simple, just to show you that it's not crafted code, it's code that is running for real. And what else? What else? So it's almost everything. So it's basically everything for the presentation. If you want to stay in touch, these are all my references. I'm usually very active in the Python UK IRC channel. Yes, I'm an old school guy. Please don't spam my email. If you want to send something sensible, you know, something you request privacy, yes, you can use PGP to contact me. And finally, well, last two things. So here you can find all the references. This is the repository with the source code that I've just shown you. This is the original documentation for the library. You may have noticed, if you already know the library, that I've basically taken a lot of examples from this library. And last but not least, I'm looking for the job soon. So in case you are looking for a Python or Django developer, very interested in learning also Go and some mobile development, please let me know. Thank you. Do you have any question?
Hello. There we go. Just a quick reminder that your questions need to be actual questions, not just statements of opinion or meanderings, but I see you back there, and I'll bring you the mic.
How does it handle the DNS requests? Can I change the DNS server that the requests for the website go to? And can I see the TCP underlying the HTTP request?
To be honest, I'm not sure if you can change this thing because it's relying on the same code that is basically is being used by your lib. So it depends how Python is handling at the low level this thing. You may want to inspect what the request that you're doing using one of the tools like TCP dump or Wireshark. Of course, if you are requesting some, you won't get the data if you're requesting, for example, an SSL protected resource. So you will just see the headers. But I'm not sure if you can change that kind of behavior. So if you can change the DNS, I think you have to act at more low level if you want to change that thing.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I didn't hear.
No more questions? Okay, well, there's an extended long play version of the lightning talks going on in the assembly hall. Thank you very much.